So ADHD and aging, this was such an interesting topic because I was surprised at how little stuff there was out there to research compared to the other topics. There's such little information on aging, and then I found some stuff, and I knew some of it wasn't correct because I've studied Dr. Russell Barkley and some of those things. And so it was just super interesting. And I'm going to start out with one of the biggest things that is a myth around ADHD and aging, and that's the risk of dementia and Alzheimer's. Because that is one, if anybody's got like anxiety, that is me. Oh man, I get some OCD around that. So I'm going to start out right off the bat with that because it's so when something's scary, we click on it, right? And so if you're scrolling on social media and you have ADHD in your algorithms, you very likely have had something come up on your social media that's like, oh, Rutgers did this study or whatever, that there's a higher risk of dementia, right? And you click on it and it feels really scary and you see all the comments. Oh my gosh, if you want to tell me about if you want to like tell me something that bothers me, it's that. Because you see these like poor people freaked out in the comments, and it's not true. It's not true. There's a tiny, tiny correlation, but it's medically insignificant. And this is from the Mayo Clinic. Mayo Clinic, this is a direct quote. There is no evidence of a direct link between ADHD and dementia or Alzheimer's disease. Some studies found a slight association between Lewy body dementia and ADHD, but the connection remains murky, right? So it remains murky. It's not medically significant. They can't prove it. And that's Lewy body disease. There is not a medically significant connection or correlation between dementia and Alzheimer's. And man, those clickbait articles get me, and those poor people. So I just want to say that up front. And the part of the reason, I mean, you can probably think, like, why do people think there might be a connection? Because we got memory stuff, right? We got some memory stuff. We can forget stuff. We might lose stuff. And I've talked about this once. I think it was like last year that they found the cognitive stuff with us, the memory stuff, is different than cognitive decline. There's a different reason in our brain that we might forget stuff or have issues with our, short-term memory in the moment, right? You're gonna go get your keys to go to work, and then you start walking towards your keys and you remember you forgot your binder, so then you walk towards the binder, and then you forgot to feed the dog, and then you put the dog food in the bowl, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even eat breakfast. So then you go to look for a bar, right, or something, or a banana. You're like, man, I gotta go grocery shopping. So you go to the grocery list, right, and then you walk out to the car and you're like, I didn't even grab my keys. Right. So that's a very different thing than long-term like memory or cognitive decline. So again, the sources are different. It's a difference in the biology. And they've even correlated that short-term memory, or the working memory is what it's called, with higher intelligence. They did a study on that. Is they did that, and they found a weaker working memory is correlated to higher intelligence because our brain prunes differently. So we prune away things that don't matter as much. So we prioritize things that are urgent, right? And then it creates dopamine. And so there is a benefit. There is a benefit to ADHD. And if you question that, again, you've heard me say this, Einstein had ADHD. Einstein, the smartest guy to ever live. So if you feel, behind, or your memory stuff, it's different than cognitive decline. The other big thing I want to say off the bat is that ADHD is not progressive. It does not get worse. It's not a progressive thing. It's how your brain is formed. And so I'll talk a little bit. There are things with our age, though, there are traits that we have that the volume might get turned up a little bit because that's a normal part of aging. And then there's stuff that's actually going to get better. So I'm going to talk to you about what ADHD traits will actually improve. Somebody threw a question there. What if dementia runs in the family? Grandparents had it. Now my aunt has it. Here I am with ADHD. Wonder if it makes me more susceptible. Just a thought. That's a really great question. So from what I read in the research, if there was a correlation between us being more susceptible to dementia with ADHD, that would show in the correlation of us more likely to have it. And they haven't found a correlation that we're more likely to develop dementia. And so if we were more genetically predisposed, that would show up in those results. And since there's nothing medically significant, then I would say I think your chance, from what I've read in the studies, is the exact same, even if it runs in your family. Now, I think the other thing is why there's a myth sometimes about this is because our habits sometimes might put us more at risk dementia, but ADHD itself does not, right? So anybody have sleep issues like me, like sometimes trouble light sleeping, might be more impulsive, right? We're more likely to have like substance stuff. There's maybe more stress, more cortisol. So they're an impulse eating. So maybe we don't eat as well, or we forget to eat. There's all kinds of stuff, but that's our normal risk, and so you can mitigate that and have your risk the exact same as somebody else who doesn't have ADHD, just by doing those same habits. Now, I will say, here's another thing. So I went through a period, you guys noticed I had like just went down. I had like an OCD flare up. I didn't know that's what it was, like deep, deep depression. I talked about this when we did our mental health month. And I was sleeping like 1 hour a night for a while. It was bad. And I wasn't eating. And cortisol. It was like really bad until I got on medication. Everything helped. This was like 3, 4 years back. So if that was going to make me more at risk for cognitive decline, it would have been that. And I had to go in for a brain scan, an MRI, because they were checking out to see if I had a tumor. This was like years later. And I'm like, I've had so much trauma. I know we've had a lot of trauma too. Like other people, if you had PTSD or trauma, like all this stuff, I thought my brain is screwed. You know what I mean? Like I've even had brain injuries from like snowboarding and concussions. Well, anyways, I went in for a brain scan for this MRI with contrast and all this stuff. And I asked them about dementia, and they looked at it, and the neurologist from the hospital was like, "Your brain actually looks super healthy. Like your brain is like healthier than someone at your age." So I just want to throw that out there. If you have like complex PTSD and you have sleep issues and OCD, like still super sharp and not even showing decline. So if that makes anybody feel better, it made me feel better. So yeah, good question about the dementia. So that's one risk. We are not more at risk for dementia or Alzheimer's. And then, right, ADHD is not progressive. That's the other big thing. It's not going to get worse as you age. If you feel like it's getting worse, um, there might be a factor going on, but it's not that it's progressing. So hormonally, as our hormones change as we age, that's going to have an effect, right? You might not be able to get the same amount of movement. You might have mobility might be limited. And so remember, exercise and movement, those old habits that might have helped you before with a lot of movement, that can engage the frontal lobe, create dopamine, and you're in a it's going to help. You're not going to be as understimulated, right? So if your habits change as you age, and you're not as active, then it might feel like it's getting worse. If you are going through menopause, right? If your hormones are changing, it might feel like it's getting worse. If you're getting more responsibility on you, or you're getting more stress, or you're in that middle age, like that transition where you're processing the fact we're aging. I mean, I've been going through that a little bit, and I'm sure I will continue to go through that as I age. Like some of that stuff can have an effect, but it's your ADHD is not getting worse, right? So I want to throw that out there because those are some of the biggest fears for people. Now, our working memory, as I talked about with our ADHD traits, normal aging, our working memory is typically affected, right? That's a normal thing. Doesn't mean it's dementia, doesn't mean it's Alzheimer's, but our memory can get a little bit worse. And that's just common with aging. So if we already have an impaired working memory and then we add to this normal, cognitive difference in our memory, it's getting a little bit worse. It feels like maybe it's our ADHD getting worse, but it's not. It's just normal aging. So brain fog, we have that. Brain processing speed. These are like normal aging things. So as you age, if you're feeling like, oh man, this is getting worse, this is harder, look up normal aging, and if there's a crossover, an overlap with ADHD, then you might just your ADHD is your baseline, and then it's might be just aging. There are things that improve with age. So some of these, like our hyperactivity, can actually get more mild with age. So that's one thing that can do that. Our impulsivity, that can actually calm down a little bit. We might be not quite as impulsive. Our prefrontal cortex, there's parts of our brain, and there's a couple different studies that point to with ADHD and neurodivergence. Our brain, especially our frontal lobe, is going to develop a little bit more slowly, and it's not fully developed until 30, whereas for some people it's in mid 20s who don't have ADHD. So we haven't reached that full capacity with our prefrontal cortex until like our 30s, sometimes mid 30s, sometimes a little bit later. And so you'll see, and I don't know, if I've definitely felt a shift of of being able to do things a little bit more differently, be a little bit more patient, sit still, kind of process those things. So that's something that can improve as well with age. And then our emotion regulation is something that can improve. And especially if you're working on this stuff, right? If you're working with an ADHD coach or doctor, or you're just like working on yourself, right? There are things that are going to improve because you're developing skills of how to do this. You're unmasking, you're not hiding your traits anymore, and you're accepting them for what they are instead of trying to outwork them or just numb them out. And you're going to see your nervous system calm down. You're going to see you having more energy. If you feel constantly exhausted all the time, there's a good chance that you're doing stuff that's not in your joy zone in your business. Like, you are doing it the way you think you're supposed to instead of the way that might be better for you. Or like, you're trying to prove something, you know what I mean? Or you're like not focusing on money making activities, so you're tired and you can't hire an admin. Like, there's a lot of different reasons. But unmasking can really help increase energy levels, because it's tiring to try to pretend to be something you're not. It really is. Um, so those are a couple things that actually get better with age. And then, time blindness can sometimes get better. Uh, and time blindness ability to gauge time. And I mean, some of this stuff, it's not like our brain's going to change. We're going to get better at managing it, right? We're going to get better knowing, here's something that I've trained my brain, other people have. I know with time blindness, right? Because we can see time as now or not now. That's with ADHD, a lot of times how we see time. It's either now or not now. And we don't see it as this timeline in the same way that a non-ADHD person does. And is anybody like gauge how long it's going to get ready, and then like it's never enough time, or man, I forgot I have to do this and this, so then you're late even if you've really tried, right? Like, that's something I've done. So what you train yourself to do is, it's typically going to take double the amount of time that you think. So think of it like the gauge in your brain that tells you how much time it takes is off, like double that time. If you think it's going to take 15 minutes for you to get ready, plan for 30. If you think it's going to take, 30 minutes for you to finish the tasks for your CRM, plan for an hour. Like, we want to double the time so you can actually train your brain. So if you're doing some of these things, you're training your brain, it's actually going to do it automatically. And that happened to me this morning. I was like early from my appointment, an hour and a half away, which was crazy. But I wasn't rushing. And so some of this stuff is going to be like just your brain naturally improving on some of these traits, and some of it's going to be over time you're teaching yourself those. Another thing that's really interesting, and this is backed up by Dr. Russell Barkley, is that if you are taking ADHD medication, that it can actually create and strengthen neural pathways in the brain where your traits might not be as strong, even if you were to go off medication. And that can happen to some people, not everybody, but some. There are some people who go on ADHD medication, the right medication, and they can come off of it for a little bit, and they don't have as strong of the traits. So, and then there are some traits that will typically stay the same. Some of our planning, right, our prioritizing, maybe our focus, because we have an interest-based nervous system. So we're going to get dopamine when we're interested in something, and our brain's going to say, nope, you don't get dopamine when it's boring, or it's not urgent, or it's not interesting, or it's not connected to a passion. And so that's going to stay the same. But I don't know. I was thinking about it yesterday, and I thought, if somebody came, with a magic wand, I don't know, a fairy godmother, and said, hey, Tyler, if you like, I can take away your ADHD. Was thinking about that last night. I don't think I would do that. Because the more that I learn how my brain works and put stuff in place, the more that you're putting buffers in for the traits that are hard, and the more you get to embrace the stuff that's really cool. Because there's stuff I can do that other people can't do. There's stuff that you can do that other people cannot do who don't have ADHD. Like, it seriously, they can't do what you do. And so that's why figuring out what the traits are and really like embracing the diagnosis, or whatever's helpful to look at it, and not shaming yourself and being curious and putting stuff in place, is going to highlight the stuff that's great, like being able to sustain focus on things that are interesting, having all these creative ideas, being less risk averse, having intuitiveness and the empathy that we can have, and understanding, and the hyper focus when it is really interesting. So that's really a really cool thing. So there are some things that are going to stay the same, some things that might seem different, and some things that might feel better, especially if you're like really aware of where things are showing up and not beating yourself up. Like if you're having trouble, let's say, we talked about procrastination, or for a lot of us, what it's actually is executive dysfunction, right? Like there's not dopamine. So if instead of you can't do something, and you feel like you're procrastinating and you're beating yourself up, instead you say, where's the resistance coming from? Is there a different way to do this? I wonder how I can support myself. You're going to get tools in place where that's going to feel better. But if you're beating yourself up and shaming yourself, it's not, you know. Um, so it's, because ADHD is primarily genetic, it's not, our brain doesn't really change, right? It's genetic. It's The brain structure is not going to change. We're not going to have our brain is not going to get bigger or smaller or change its biology. So it's just a really, I mean, maybe this is why there wasn't like a ton of information about it. I don't know. Now there is, and this for everybody, our neurotransmitters in our brain over time sometimes can decline, like our dopamine receptors and the ability for dopamine to bind to these receptors. So adults in general, that's why we can experience a decrease in cognitive function or like thinking speed and working memory, but that's everybody, right? There's everybody. And I haven't found a significant correlation to Parkinson's either, even though Parkinson's can be caused by a lack of dopamine. So if you feel worried about that this is something in your brain or you're going to get something later on, please calm that. There's tons of studies, and the stuff that I've looked at, they take a multitude of studies. Not just one by one university and throw it on there. It's a multitude of studies, and they're not finding. So how do we manage our traits as we age? It's never too late to get a diagnosis. We have somebody in our group who reached out to me who's 85 years old and just finally found out and said it took 85 years of shame off her shoulders. So please know that it's never too late. And some ways that you can really work with this as you age is one, whether you're working with a neurodivergent, friendly, or informed therapist, that can really help, or a coach. That can really help if you're part of a group like you are this one, or if you're part of our group coaching, that can be good. Finding certain apps that work for you, or alarms or routines. Sometimes we can look for this, like, I don't know, like this thing that's going to change our life or something, or it works really well for 2 weeks and then it drops off. And then we think, oh, it doesn't work anymore. And instead, I'd like you to collect the tools that work, even if it's a day, even if it's a week, and put it in your toolkit, and even rotate them when they get stale. And then you're going to have a sheet somewhere or something of just when something works, write it down, and you'll learn patterns and you can go back to it. If a certain type of schedule works for you, even if it's a couple days, pull that out later on, and try it again. So as we age, it's really good to just keep trying stuff and seeing what works for us, even if it works for a little bit, and get routines and look at it as this, you are learning yourself and how to help yourself. Just like if it was a kid, if it's your kid, if you're niece, nephew, if you're teaching a kid, let's figure out all the stuff that helps make things easier. And then movement is so important, especially for us. And just, if dementia or anything, I mean, in general, that's one of the most powerful things, is movement with that. Because I was neurotic and had OCD about medical stuff and was freaked out about dementia, and I went down a rabbit hole, just so you know. It can really is that movement. So that's just in general, right? We don't have a higher risk for that, but movement's really helpful. And again, it engages our brain, which is chronically understimulated a lot of times, unless we're really in things that are interesting to us. And so not only is going to help improve your ADHD traits, it's also going to protect you and help with cognitive decline and all those things. So that's really important. Get your movement in, whatever that looks like. And then sleep if you can, right? If you can get sleep, I know sometimes we can struggle with that. So that can be really helpful the more that you can do that. And then like just go to the doctor regularly, get your blood work tested. And then I'm going to throw in here vitamin D levels. I've said this a lot, and I'm going to say it again, is that we are statistically lower in vitamin D. You've heard me say that a lot. It's almost everybody that I've heard that's gotten tested. The ADHD Center says you want at least over 50. And vitamin D levels is one thing that most insurance pays for in your blood work. So as you're getting your blood work, whether it's every 6 months, every year, do that and really work to keep that on there. Higher vitamin D levels also protect you against cancer, just FYI. So vitamin D is really good for our brain, for our body, for our health, for our immune system. And we, with ADHD, all across the board, almost everyone is lower on it. That is what I have noticed from that. And then the other one is community, right? Find a community. It can feel very lonely, and that's why this is such a gift to have started this, to have all of you, to have a community myself as well, that I know is never going anywhere. Like unless I'm going somewhere, it's not going anywhere. And it's such a gift to everybody. It's such a gift to me. So have a community, have other people that's so important right now, and share and reach out if you need support or you need help. So yeah, so really, kind of in summary, if you came on a little later, you just want a summary, there's not a significant correlation between aging and ADHD and dementia or Alzheimer's. ADHD is not progressive. There are actually some things that might actually get better or easier with ADHD. And then there are some things that might feel like they're getting worse, but it's really just normal aging that overlaps with our ADHD traits. So the volume gets turned up. And the best thing you can do as you age is to accept it, take care of yourself, really work on things that help you, and figure out how to get your life in alignment with things that you enjoy. And yeah, just know how cool our brains are. Well, thank you so much for being here, and always give me feedback if you need anything, and then we'll see you next Tuesday. And yeah, this is ADHD Awareness Month, so it's pretty fun. Or we'll see you Thursday, this Thursday, for our ADHD Friendly Business Planning Clinic. So, all right, well, have a wonderful day, everybody. Thanks for all the ahas in the comments, and see you next time.